Hello and welcome to the Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min podcast network. Speaking after Manchester United's 1-0 win over Brentford at Old Trafford on Wednesday night, I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette to talk just about that game, really, and look ahead to the Everton game on Saturday, Saturday, 12:30. Rob, our last show was all doom and gloom. It was, these players don't try. Where's the effort? Where's the basics of passing? Can you pass a ball 5 yards? No. Well, last night they could. A better feeling around the club at the moment after that.
Yes, didn't we need it? After some dire performances or some performances going south, this was a better one, wasn't it? I said on Twitter before the game, all I really wanted to see from United was some angry football, some hunger, show that they actually want it, and then the rest kind of follows. Do you know what I mean? If you win those battles, then the ball suddenly starts popping around a little bit more. You start being able to pass it a little bit more. You're not doing all the regressive stuff. So I think what you would describe as a decent performance, it wasn't otherworldly, but it was good. And thankfully, Brentford were not particularly good. But I do think it was actually Manchester United that controlled the flow of the game. And that's what really hurt Brentford, being able to do their thing. So really, really good. Some positive performances to talk about. And most importantly, 3 points.
Yeah, I think we should stress Brentford were not very good. But all you can ask for really in those circumstances is just the 3 points and a decent performance. Nothing extravagant from United, but, the basics were there. The effort was there. Fundamentals were there. We'll dig into this in a little bit. I'll just get the show plugs out the way. YouTube, we're on YouTube twice a week, usually Tuesdays and Fridays, but it is a Thursday as we record this because Easter is coming up. The agenda might change a little bit of our days that we record, but we will let you know in future shows just over the next couple of weeks with some other things going on. Head over to the channel on YouTube, like, subscribe, and leave a comment for us, and download on audio wherever you get your podcasts. We are available pretty much everywhere, whichever podcast provider you use. Follow us on Twitter too, as Rob mentioned, @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B. I can't talk this morning. It's too early, Rob. And @PromiseLandMU for the show. We'll talk today about the Brentford game. A few players that we need to mention. We'll answer some comments that have come in over the last few days as well. We'll look ahead to Everton. And also, a little bit of a surprise for you at the end of the show. I've been given, if you're watching on YouTube, cards like this. And for the audio listeners, they are prompts. These are cards for the Premier League Hall of Fame. There is a vote which is going on at the moment. We'll talk at the end of the show, and I'm going to get Rob's picks. We're only going to go through the United players. There's about 10, 15 players on the nominees list, but there's 5 United players. And given this is a Man United podcast, we'll do the Man United slant. But that will be at the end of the show. Now, Rob, Brentford losing 1-0 to United. What was different then? What was different from what we saw at the weekend? And even in recent performances, you think back to the Fulham game in the FA Cup. I know United got over the line in that game, but the performance wasn't there for a long time. Bailed out with some late goals. This one was different, though. This was Erik ten Hag seemingly getting into their heads and saying, no, that's not acceptable. You need to perform better. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, yes, and you don't win a football match in the first 10 or 15 minutes of a game, do you? But there was a notable difference between what United have done in maybe recent matches in those first 10 or 15 minutes and what they did at Old Trafford last night. They set their stall out, didn't they? They went up to Brentford, and I think it's what we said in the last podcast. Kind of when you put your chin out and say, "Go on then, punch it." But we'll punch back and we'll fight you back. And there was that kind of combativeness, wasn't there, about United's play? So it goes to show, Scott, that they can do all these things when Casemiro isn't there. They can actually fight teams and get in the trenches and do all the kind of dogs of war stuff. A lot of the time, I think there's a lot of excuses for these very highly paid footballers. But it was a much bigger, I think, kind of performance across the board, wasn't it, from back to front. Defence, midfield was massively improved from the Newcastle game. It popped. It worked really well. And then, of course, up top, you made that big change, really, with Weghorst not playing a minute, which was interesting, and Rashford going through the middle, and, of course, Jaden Sancho coming back into the team. So kind of, I think Ten Hag rolled the dice, but they're not massive risks, are they? These are not things that we go, oh, that's a strange decision from this manager. They're all stuff all within his remit of being a manager and trying to get this team popping again. And it was a good performance. As I said, very professional, and they took the points. They won 1-0. It could have been 2-0. It probably should have been 2-0 or 3-0. But at the end of the day, scorelines do not matter. Victories do.
Yeah, you mentioned the midfield there, Rob, and the last conversation we had after Newcastle kind of overran United's midfield on Sunday was, oh God, this midfield terrifies me without Casemiro and Eriksen there. But then I was looking at the lineup graphics as I was preparing to watch the match, United's versus Brentford's. I think Brentford played 3 Danish players in there. And I thought, that United 3, Sabitzer, McTominay, Bruno, versus that 3, come on.
Yeah.
They're all better footballers. You just need to put the right amount of application in, and your job should be relatively simple. And that is, in the end, how it came out. But, I mean, we'll talk about all the midfielders on their own in today's show, and we'll start now, I suppose. Tom the Brick, or at Tom the Brick on Twitter, commented to one of my tweets yesterday and asked me, how does Scott McTominay play? Please, please, please discuss this on the podcast. Maybe my untrained eye is wrong. I just can't see how he can possibly get in this team. So, Rob, I'm going to ask you, what does he offer to this team? And why does Ten Hag pick him? Because what I did see from McTominay last night was intelligent pressing, good energy. He offers, somebody commented back on that, he offers height in the box to defend from corners. He's more than that, though. Obviously, we know his limitations, this kind of thing, but he does seem to get to some fans who are watching and they don't see the obvious technical quality that he has. Obviously, then he kind of sticks out as a sore thumb in a sense, as being really off standard. But what is it that managers like Jose Mourinho, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Erik ten Hag see in him to continue playing him?
Well, when they said things we said previously about why managers keep players or play players, is a lot of the time it's down to trust and not quality. So you might get a player who has a less quality than maybe someone on the bench, but you just go and trust them to fulfill the orders of what you're telling them to do. So, we saw Scotty, didn't we, play the 10 against Newcastle, and it was a great big mess. Oh, what a surprise that is. But what did they do in this game against Brentford? There's the same 3 players, wasn't it? Sabitzer, McTominay, and Bruno. But, so what does McTominay do in that system? Well, I don't want McTominay being the creative one at the top. Like, no thanks. And what we saw was Sabitzer playing the 10 last night, Bruno playing the 8, and he played the 8 very well. I thought it was the best he's played the 8 all season long. But then those 2 things help McTominay, doesn't it? Because then McTominay can go and do some of the running around, because you do need a little bit of that. And I think we saw, it was 2 moments last night where McTominay made 2 big blocks going across the box. Again, if he doesn't make those blocks, one might end up in the net. This is a different show today. We're talking about a draw, and unfortunately, United dropping points again. So that is what Scott McTominay is. That is why Scott McTominay is liked by certain managers, and that is why Newcastle are fishing around signing Scott McTominay. So I will always understand why he's completely unpopular, because he is. He's an unfashionable player. I do think on the ball he's a problem. Just don't think he's got maybe the necessary skills for United going into next season, or someone on the ball that you need. You'd rather have someone that does both, a bit of running around and be technical. But I think you've got to give Scott his dues last night. He was okay. He did his job, and him doing his job went a long way to Manchester United winning the game.
You mentioned Marcel Sabitzer there. Obviously, we had a conversation about him on the last show, on loan from Bayern at the moment. Smart assist from him with the header down to Marcus Rashford, who was just coming back from an offside position. And had managed to get onside and obviously thunder the ball into the net. Sabitzer in the 10, we obviously know that since he's come in, he can play 6, 8, 10, left, right, if necessary. He was quite effective in the 10, though, wasn't he? Obviously you mentioned there Bruno dropping a little bit deeper. Sabitzer just offers a little bit of quality up there.
Yeah, and he's a driving force in the 10. So he's not your traditional Odegaard, De Bruyne, even Bruno type 10. He's never going to be, have that sweet pass in him or that kind of little bit of skill or finesse. but he's kind of like a bulldozer from 10. He likes to run forward. This is what he was known for before he went to Bayern Munich. He was known for being a player that can get you goals and assists. And I think I've mentioned before about how high his XG is and his XA is in the Bundesliga from playing from that position. So I was pleasantly surprised to see him kind of freed up from the number 8 duties last night to go and play behind Marcus. And I actually think, in terms the combination worked for the goal, of course, and it was clever from Sabitzer with that little nod down there and Marcus just firing it home. That's the combination you want from your 10 and 9, isn't it? We talk about these things all the time. So, a big tick for him. I think we will see him play the 10 again. Christian Eriksen coming back will kind of muddy some of that, and you might see him going back to the 8 just because. But it was a nice little experiment that's not really a risk. Again, it's not something that Ten Hag's doing, something that we don't know that Sabitzer can do. It's just that we have not seen him do it yet for Man United, have we? So I think that then allows Bruno to be a better number 8, doesn't it? Because there's someone driving forward and stretching the play. And then that allows McTominay to swing round and cover a little bit more because that's what he's good at. And that's what they didn't do at Newcastle, Scott. It was just a big jumbled mess. But against Brentford, they knew they had to kind of be a little bit more resolute, and they did that. And I think Sabitzer was a big part of that.
Yeah, like we say, obviously, hopefully, the next game against Everton will be the last game where United don't have Casemiro. His suspension ends after the Everton game. And hopefully Christian Eriksen is back in first team contention within the next week. I think Everton might come too soon for him, but for those of you who were watching, there was a camera shot of him in the stands next to Garnacho watching the game with a big beard. Went up in my estimation after that, if it's possible. But yeah, what United have to do at the moment is just find ways to get through this period, I guess, right? And I think that what we saw against Brentford was probably the best example of how Ten Hag should go about constructing his midfield in the absence of those two players. And you mentioned Bruno Fernandes. I know, Rob, you're quite you often look at Bruno and you think you get frustrated with the fact that he gives the ball away a lot. Mm-hmm. That was much more measured from him last night, though. And he dictated the tempo. He was very smart. He gave the ball away once or twice, but that's to be expected. That can happen. But you mentioned Bruno in the 8 already playing his best performance in that position. What was it about Bruno for you that impressed you?
I think, first of all, we said his ball retention and being smart. So when I kind of focus on Bruno, I do that because I expect more of him because he is our best player, certainly our best midfielder in those roles, isn't it? Playing the 8 does not suit him as a player. I'm sure, there were times even last night where it felt like he was itching to get forward and itching to kind of go and join Marcus and join Jadon and get further up the pitch. But of course, the role is about being disciplined. But what did he do, Scott? He was picking the ball up and doing the simple stuff really well. And he did give the ball away once or twice, but there's no problem with that. Everyone does that. That's not a problem, is it? And then he was getting his head up and turning that kind of possession into transition and getting United on the front foot quickly. That's what I want to see from Bruno. But I do also understand that it's the impact of everyone, isn't it? And that's why you can't just put it on Bruno Fernandes' shoulders when things go wrong. We might highlight him. I might say, I'm disappointed in certain things. I think you saw last night that when he got the ball off the back foot or in those areas, there was no thinking. He just kind of turned and he was playing the balls into the channels really quickly and allowing us to kind of get forward. And that's a big part of our game is transition. And if your midfielders are not implementing the transition and getting you going, guess what? You don't transition. It doesn't work. So I think that it's Bruno playing that role last night. It helped that McTominay did some of the more dirty work, and it helped that Sabitzer was driving the 10 and pushing the traffic that way. It gives you space. Bruno with space is a better footballer. Bruno in no space is a worse footballer. So I was pleased with his performance last night, and I think we need to see more of that. Again, it is still, I think, noteworthy and debatable as to why he's not playing the 10. Like, why could Sabitzer not play the 8? And I think a lot of it will be about ball work. So a lot of it will be saying who can make that pass. Well, Bruno can make it, but he's got to do it. He's got to task himself to do it. He was much more disciplined last night, Scott. And that was a big part of this victory. You just said there about Brentford's midfield at the top of the show. It's a little bit like Newcastle. You were up against Willock, and you're up against Willock. Who was the other midfielder? Sorry. and
Longstaff.
yeah. And those two guys were not getting our midfields when you compare it to our midfielders. So sometimes it's a little bit of an anomaly, but it's the same with Brentford. Those guys wouldn't get in our midfield. And therefore, you're tasked to be better than them. And they were last night. And again, this is all part of the building blocks towards this victory.
How much of it was, and Bruno's space that he was finding, how much of that was down to Brentford being a lot more submissive than Newcastle were?
Yeah, a little bit. But, I think when you look at these games back to back, and we'll talk a little bit more about Everton later on in the show, is that Brentford and Everton, I think quality-wise, are not massively different, and tactically not massively different. The difference maybe now at this point of the season is that Brentford have maybe got one eye on their holidays and thinking, we've done our season, like we're going to be top half and we've done really well. And Everton are going to turn up at Old Trafford fighting to stay in the league. So there's a difference. So you might have similar players, but then you've got to do it again, haven't you? You've got to look at the players and say, well, you're inferior to us. So we've got to make that show and count on a football pitch. They didn't do it against Newcastle, but they did do it against Brentford. So you've got to take that game to game, as you said. And I won't be surprised to see Bruno just carry on not playing the 10. Like, I think we've got used to it now that for some reason, even later in the game, Scott, I was thinking as you were tying it down, would you just let Bruno go and go at the top end so he can kind of stretch the play himself and maybe play something a little bit deeper, play mid-block or something like that? No, Bruno played the 8 the whole game, and he seems to be playing games in central midfield non-stop. So for Bruno, it's just about do all the basics properly and then allow your kind of flair game to take over in those moments where it can.
Another player that we've seen, and we are running through a few players today. Another player that we've seen play in the 10 on occasion is Jaden Sancho. He did get a start last night and played all right. A comment from Prajval saying, pretty sure I heard you all predicting correctly that Scott McTominay will be starting as the 10. This is referring to a previous match and not hating that idea as much in the last episode. I think Ten Hag got it wrong and won't be going there anytime soon, which he obviously didn't last night.
No.
What do you think of Sancho in the 10 role? It's been hit and miss, but I feel he's shown a bit more there than he has on the wings. Now, he did play on the wing last night. What do you think, Rob? Is it kind of horses for courses kind of thing with Jaden, or is his best position on the left? We don't really see him on the right that much. I noticed last night. What do you think? We've had this conversation on this podcast before about where he fits into this. He's not an automatic starter at the moment. You can't really see it happening anytime soon. He's more of a rotation option. But do you think Jadon Sancho in the 10 when Eriksen and Casemiro are back is just not an option that we're going to see anymore? Is it a case of Sancho will be put back out on the wings? And he was on the wing last night and played a lot better than recently.
He had a decent performance as well, didn't he? And I think a lot of this is down to chemistry. So it's all very well we talk about the number 10 in isolation, but I don't think it actually helps things. Like we've just done the segment there about the midfield, and it's about the midfield working together so players can do their individual jobs and they all look better within that system. I think the thing is with Jadon Sancho, and this is what you have to highlight, is what is Jadon Sancho? Is he a winger? Is he a player who can play the 10 and kind of drift and pick the ball up and allow you to kind of get going? Can he give you, say, the energy that Sabitzer gave you last night in that role? Well, I think there's kind of some variables there. First of all, I think if you do need a 10 that drives, like we did last night with Sabitzer, then you can't pick Jaden Sancho. Jaden Sancho is not going to drive the ball in that way. Jaden Sancho is a cute footballer who can dribble with the ball and take the space and maybe work in tighter areas. I think what we saw last night was really interesting. So that Marcus obviously being pushed through the middle and Jaden being pushed left. Jaden played it almost like Anthony does on the right. He's getting the ball and inverting. And quite often you were seeing, it's quite radical at times, Marcus kind of going into the left channel and seeing Jaden come all the way across to the right to join Anthony. That's acutely tactical. Whether fans pick that up, I don't know. But that's a direct instruction to get Jaden to float away from the left. Because Jaden's never really going to go on the outside, is he, from that side? It's just not what he does. Same like Anthony, because he's left-footed. He's never really going to go on the outside. It's just not what he wants to do, but it's not what the manager wants either. So I think the most obvious position for Jaden is still somewhere on the left. But I believe, infinitely, that when everyone is fit, you must play Marcus Rashford on the left. Marcus Rashford is the best left-sided forward in the world on form. Now, last night, Marcus played through the middle, and he played okay, but I don't think it was great. He wasn't great at the press. He scored his goal, but it's from really a just off the back of a set piece, ball coming into the box, a knockdown. I think he would have been there anyway, even if he wasn't playing the striker role. And then you look at Jadon, and I think Jadon was allowed to drift last night. But what do you do, Scott, when you've got Eriksen back, when you've got Casemiro back, and then you're looking to play Bruno maybe higher up the pitch? Well, it means that Jadon doesn't play, not as it stands. Jaden Sancho's form needs to be better and more consistent, and then he's much more of a viable starter. Him as a 10, at times in games, possibly, but I don't see it. He was never really a 10 at Dortmund, and they didn't like him. They liked him in wider areas, and I think he played as a 10 at City when he was really young for short periods. But again, it wasn't something that Pep wanted to develop. So let's wait and see. I don't know with Jadon. I think the jury's still out, and I think a good performance, we're going to have to take him now game by game.
Now, this isn't a luxury that players get at Man United, but somebody, I think I've seen this on my timeline last night. I can't remember who suggested it, but suggested that Jaden Sancho was more of a player who needs game time in a role to grow into it rather than being rotated into a team for 20 minutes at a time because he never really picks up the momentum. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's fair, but it's also a little bit throwaway because everyone needs game time. Like all footballers, no one comes back and hits the ground running. We saw last night with Anthony Martial coming off the bench that it's tough. It's a hard sell when you've not maybe been training or not being in the first team. So I agree with that, but there's no way this can be a popularity contest for Ten Hag. He has to look at it as building bricks. And if he looks at Sancho and says, well, I want to play Sancho, but I can only play him on the left, and I've got Marcus Rashford, then unfortunately, Jaden Sancho is not going to play. And that is just the brass tacks of it. He does need game time, Scott, but he's not going to get that rotation as it stands at the end of the season. We are too near the end of the campaign to start risking things not working. And that is a problem. And Jaden Sancho's got to this part of the season now. We're so many months into it, even months after his journey out to the Netherlands to train and to get back fit and to get back to where he needs to be. We're past that now. We're in the kind of red zone. This is it now. We have to win games. So we can't really mess around too much. And Jadon played last night because we needed some more creativity. I thought United were more creative with him on the football pitch. But when everyone's fit, Casemiro's back, Eriksen's back, Bruno playing higher up the pitch, he sits on the sideline and I want Marcus on the left. I'm a little bit worried about moving Marcus Rashford now because Marcus Rashford's been the best left-sided forward in the world this year. And we're going to move him to play a guy that hasn't played very well at all. Like, we want Jadon to do well, but he's going to have to take the slim pickings. He's going to have to do it in smaller windows and prove to the manager and prove to us that he's ready to start once again. He's still miles behind Garnacho to me. Like, Garnacho's not played now for weeks because he's injured. And in my head, I'm still thinking if Garnacho was fit tomorrow, Garnacho's the guy you play on the left when Rashford's not there. So that's difficult for Jadon. I don't think Jadon fits on the right in this system at all. He can't invert from the right. And that's why you see Anthony plays all those minutes.
I suppose that's the way it should be, though, right?
Of course.
If you want to be a successful club, if you're not performing, you got to take your chance when you get it.
Closer to democracy, isn't it? It's closer. You take plays, prove it. And we know that this manager's massive on that. We know he tells them behind the scenes that you've got to prove it to get in my football team. And he did say last night about Sancho before the game and after. He went, Sancho's trained really well. I was happy to put him in last night. I do think it was a little bit as a reaction to Newcastle to try and change something. And of course, then you've got that option of playing Marcus through the middle for Weghorst.
In the run through of players that we're doing today, we will do one more. Anthony Martial. Now, let me just pluck a comment from Erik ten Hag's post-match presser. He was asked, is Martial not fit to start yet? I quote, no, otherwise he was an option, but I don't think in this moment he's game fit enough to have a start. Obviously, when you see Anthony Martial's record over the years, you have to be really careful to plan it. So I don't want to take that risk because I know when he's on the pitch, he has a great impact on our performance. Now, some suggestions from media in the UK that he's run out of patience with Anthony Martial. We know that, obviously, United are targeting a striker. We've talked excessively about Weghorst, who we didn't see at all last night. Martial came back with about 20 minutes left, or 25 minutes left. I can't remember exactly when he came on. Obviously, United are better, and Ten Hag's right. United are much better with him in the team. But to kind of criticize the injury record and the fact that he can't get fit I think it's completely fair for him to do. I think it caught me by surprise a little bit, though. I thought he'd be a little bit more protective. But if he's not going to take, Martial's had more than a chance this season to prove that he's fit and to prove that he will do whatever it takes to get in this team. But if Ten Hag can't depend on him, there's a reason why United are looking for a new striker. Well, what did you make of Martial's performance and the bigger picture?
I think it was pretty evident last night from Martial's performance is that he is massively short of match fitness. Now, again, we could be saying, couldn't we? Oh, he needs minutes, so let's play minutes. Well, we're not at that point in the season. We can't do that. It's too many things happening, and you're going to have to probably use him from the bench. Ten Hag has alluded before that the issue with Anthony Martial is not actually in-game. The issue is out of game, is recovery, and is that he doesn't recover very well from game to game to game. And I think that Ten Hag's learnt that the hard way this season. I think he's tried to manage Martial sympathetically, but you're now at the point where maybe you're just saying to him, look, we're just going to have to use you as a bench role, 20 minutes a game, and you're going to have to make a quick impact. Now, I think last night, I liked United's shape better when Martial was playing through the middle. I think United just looked more natural in what they were doing. But the difference is that you can see Martial's tank is empty. Like I said to you off camera, it was like with about 10 minutes ago, you look at the latter game stages, and he was really like huffing and puffing. It's a difficult game, professional football. You got to be an elite athlete. So it's going to hurt Martial, isn't it? So I agree with you. I think this is why it's a natural conversation to talk about future strikers and where you go. No doubt the Harry Kane, Osimhen thing's going to be on transfer roulettes now to the end of the season and into the summer. And there's reason for that. I want to add one more name to that as well, Scott. Ollie Watkins. Watch this space. I think Ollie Watkins has really proved himself this year and has done in the last couple of years. A hard-working, pressing striker that scores goals. Sounds like what United need. But you look at Martial, whether he will be shown the door in the summer, I don't know, but possibly. Like, who will stump up the money for him?
I think that's the sticking point, really.
With this kind of injury record. And it's a little bit of like Phil Jones-isms. It's that if you haven't got a market for him, then you keep him and try and just work with him and try and get him fit. And you might be able to use him because the contract is the contract, and that's that. And I think with Anthony Martial, because he's getting to the end of his deal or pushing that way.
I think he has 2 years.
It's 2 years, exactly. So it's not like he's going to finish this summer, but there's every chance that maybe you flog him on the cheap just to get the wage off, because obviously he's on a big wage. And that is a problem, isn't it? So, you'd rather have, I think, at this stage or going into the next campaign, a Martial off your books and maybe someone like a Watkins on, because Ollie Watkins will play every game and will push hard and allows you to play Marcus in his best position, allows the midfield to push up, allows you to do the things you want to do. So there are players out there that do fit. There is value in the market. You've just got to go find it.
Martial has 1 year plus an option. So
yes,
we were right. And United won't let that run, I don't think. Unless he just isn't fit anymore and they want to get his wage off the wage bill.
That's the only reason why they won't execute an option, but they will. That United's strategy always with contracts is to execute that option. They always do. And they do that because it then gives them the power with the sale. If they want to sell a player on, they've got them under contract still. So I think Anthony Martial, you could still use him as a make weight if you're going to go buy a striker. Again, and Aston Villa have aspirations. I'm not going down the Ollie Watkins route just for no reason. But if you actually wanted to get a Watkins and you had to pay cash plus player, then someone like Martial at Villa, less pressure, might work for him. But it is a fitness problem. And I think if you went and worked for Unai Emery, you'd have to be fit to play his systems.
Let us know. Rob suggesting Ollie Watkins for Manchester United. Let us know in the comments. What do you think? Let's anything else to add on Martial, or are we just thinking right, let's look ahead to the Everton game. Does he start against Everton?
No, like absolutely not. And the thing is, if he looked tired in that kind of 20-minute, half an hour period last night, it's very difficult to ask him to do an hour and not get injured. So that's the problem. So this is it. And you do need to manage him now with all these massive games coming up towards the end of the season. You might need Martial for 20 minutes to go and win you a football match. So I don't think I think it was really interesting, actually, not seeing Weghorst at all last night. And United maybe forsaking the press to play more on the deck football. That was really interesting because that's not something we've seen in the last few months. I think you kind of shifted the whole other way now, where your press has become less important and maybe keeping the ball has become more important. You'd prefer a Martial in that situation, but you're probably going to end up playing Marcus through the middle a little bit more, and then Jadon left, aren't you? It's kind of what we've talked about. That's not something I'm very keen to see, but I would like to see Martial maybe play as many minutes as possible. Like, we've got to force it out of him somehow, haven't we? You've got to play maximum minutes. But if that maximum minute is half an hour a game, Scott, you've got to live with it. He still might be really valuable in those moments, but I cannot see him starting against Everton. Everton are high-pressured. They're going to play, aggressive football. Not really the situation you want your guy who's made out of fiberglass to be playing up top, is it? It's going to be a tough football match. But then again, 20 minutes off the bench, that might suit him.
Do you think it's a case then of sticking with what worked against Brentford? Are you puzzled by Fred not really getting much game? Obviously, he's travelled, but it was a little bit odd not to see him last night. How much of it was a statement of go fix it from what we saw at Newcastle? I think he did come on, didn't he? But, usually you'd expect to see Fred in a starting lineup at the moment.
You'd expect to see Fred in the starting lineup, but I do see this kind of as like two boxing matches back to back. So maybe Ten Hag is looking one step to the future, and maybe we'll see Fred against Everton. I think we're more likely to see Fred play than when you are Martial. I don't think the manager now he kind of fell on the formula last night against Brentford will change too much. Like, he's proved that. He doesn't like to actually switch things around. He doesn't like to play rotation. I think this part of the season shows that. You've got these games coming up now, important games, haven't you? You've got the Europa League kicking back in. You've got some big matches, and you've got this running. And you've got to now, this season, Scott, becomes about Manchester United versus Tottenham Hotspur. Forget Newcastle. Newcastle are going to come third or maybe fourth, and you might come third or fourth. But it's what's behind you, isn't it? And you've got to kind of look over your shoulder. So someone like Fred in the weeks ahead will become, I think, a little bit more valuable. I'm not sure whether the international break affected his form and something you can see something in the training ground, because that is a valid possibility. But it's slim pickings, isn't it? You would expect without Casemiro being there that you would see Fred more. What you could say is that Fred is probably better with Casemiro. So maybe that's what the manager's looking towards, is that he will put that combination back on the football pitch once you get to it, once Casemiro is no longer suspended.
Yes, indeed. Everton then, like you mentioned, Rob, hardworking team. They got not an unexpected. I don't want to say an unexpected point against Tottenham, because Tottenham are awful at the moment, and yet
don't jinx it. Do not do that. Do not. Tottenham are awful and come fourth, and we're so great and come fifth.
Well, they play some bad football. Let's just put it that way.
They do.
Don't, Rob. You jinxed it. Everton obviously taking a point the other day. Michael Keane with an absolute screamer. Everton have been to Old Trafford already this season, I believe, in one of the cups, right?
Yeah,
or was that last season? And it was a difficult game for them. But again, I think this is quite similar to the Brentford game for me in terms of the amount of effort they put in, technical levels. You compared them earlier in the show, didn't you, Rob? Probably accurate. But Everton will come to Old Trafford and not really give United anything easy. But it's a case again of just do the basics. Effort levels have to be right, and you haven't more than enough quality to go and win. And it's just a case of take another 3 points this time around and get past this awful phase where you haven't got two of your midfielders and you can look forward.
Yes, look, this isn't Frank Lampard's Everton, so it's not going to be a disorganised mess, is it? This is Sean Dyche's Everton, and they will work every matchup to the absolute highest possibility. So this is the thing. We are more talented than Everton, and it doesn't matter. These things do not matter really at this point in the season. This is all about war. Can you fight these wars and put all the fires out that burn around you while still scoring the goals that you need to win football matches? And I think when you look at Everton, the fact that they're still in this precarious situation where it was like 10 clubs who could still get relegated, they're all within a few points of each other. Everton have kind of found a little bit of their mojo, haven't they? So even though I don't think they're playing fantastic football, they do look like they will score goals, or if they go longer or they get a moment of magic, like I said, the Michael Keane moment where he comes into the middle. Michael Keane, a few weeks ago, he wasn't playing, a few weeks ago, doesn't take that shot. He's confident there because he's empowered by his manager. And I think that's what we see with Dyche, is that I don't think Dyche is actually any kind of technical great god of a manager. I think what he is good at is he's good at organising. He's good at getting players to do roles, and actually you're seeing that from Everton. So that's the fear here, is that Man United go, we did all right against Brentford, take their foot off the gas just by a tiny bit, and then you get one big long ball forward and you don't deal with the second ball and Everton score. So it's very similar to Brentford in that case, when you're looking at second balls. Last night, Man United did okay with the second balls. There were still times where it's a little bit messy. Did you see the bit with De Gea with the ball at his feet where he hits Tony? And you kind of think to yourself, I don't know if you saw, actually, the camera went to Delo on the other side. Right?
I didn't, actually.
It's hilarious. And De Gea kicks it, obviously, goes off Tony, and Tony goes, and Delo is just over there like this, like that, in the right back spot, his head in his hands, and he's like just going like this, like he's in some kind of trauma. And it's like, oh my God, I've seen all this before, and I'll probably get blamed for it because he didn't pass to me. But that was it. He should have just passed the ball to Delo, and he didn't. So they're the kind of things you have to just work with, because Everton will press you. They'll work you in those areas, and they're not scared to make it physical. They're just one of those team. And Dyche, likes these matchups, the underdog. And I think he will enjoy standing on a touchline at Old Trafford, directing the traffic, pushing his Everton team forward. Because again, if you lose the game, people just say, well, Everton, you're supposed to lose this game, aren't you? So there's absolutely no pressure on them. And I think Dyche does a really good job of taking that pressure off his players' shoulders.
Early kickoff at Old Trafford on Saturday, Man United versus Everton. We'll wait and see if United can, just like we say, take another 3 points and put the sticky patch behind them. But we'll end today's show with a different section. We'll put this in the description, hopefully. But I'll just run through. There's a Premier League Hall of Fame nominees list, which is being floating around. The official Premier League app, you can vote on there. I believe voting is open until the 10th of April at 6 p.m. UK time. And the 3 inductees out of 15 will be announced on Wednesday, the 3rd of May. Fans can vote at www.premierleague.com/Hall of Fame and via the official Premier League app. There are 15 players, as we mentioned: Tony Adams, Sol Campbell, Michael Carrick, Petr Cech, Andy Cole, Ashley Cole, Jermaine Defoe, Les Ferdinand, Rio Ferdinand, Robbie Fowler, Gary Neville, Michael Owen, John Terry, Yaya Toure, and Nemanja Vidic. Now, given this is a Man United podcast, I have cue cards here. If you're watching on YouTube, I have cue cards. If you're listening, I have cue cards, and I'm holding them up at my camera so I can show Rob that I have them. And what we're going to do here, my votes will go on the 90 Min YouTube channel later this week. I think we're going to record a video with these cards later today. But since Rob's here, and since we're doing a Man United podcast this morning, I figured, why not get Rob's votes? I'm putting you on the spot, Rob. But I'll hold these players up here. So we've got Michael Carrick, we've got Andy Cole, we've got Nemanja Vidic, we've got Rio Ferdinand, and we've got Gary Neville. Now, some players have already been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think Arsene Wenger and Sir Alex Ferguson are being inducted into the Hall of Fame, but this is a voting process. Who would your votes be, Rob? Do you want to vote for any non-Man United players, or are you sticking with United?
No, not this time. Like, I probably, if I thought about it any deeper, I would, as you rolled those names off, there were 1 or 2 in there that kind of went, like Yaya Toure being one of them. But looking at the United-centric side of it, who would be my 3? So I was thinking about this. Obviously, we talked about a little bit before the show, and I've just as we've been rolling on, been considering it. For me, the first out of the 3 would be, drum roll, would be Rio Ferdinand. So I wrote a piece about Rio many years ago, and I called him Manchester United's most important signing during that period when he came to the football club, because Man United were a bit bad in defence before he came, and then obviously we had this period of sustained success with him at the hub. So I always say that I think Rio is the best centre-back I've seen in my lifetime at United, and there's been quite a few good ones, isn't there? So I think Rio could just do everything. I think the next player I would put in is Vidic. So Vidic, of course, is the oh, there we go. There's the cards. This is Scott Saunders. Play your cards right. We're playing
Big
here.
Thanks to Panini, by the way.
This is why you need to come over to YouTube and at least have a look and click on and see what they're doing. That's good, isn't it? Double-sided card. As I say, 2 Player of the Season awards there. It's quite interesting, isn't it? 5 titles, 15 goals. And Nemanja Vidic obviously became an amazing leader for Man United. I obviously remember that first 6 months where he came with Evra, and it was all a little bit precarious, wasn't it? We thought we've bought these 2 duds, and yet they both became amazing footballers for us. And of course, Nemanja became the leader. So those 2 centre-backs, maybe the best centre-back pairing of all time in the Premier League. I don't know. That's something up for debate, but I certainly think that they were up there with anyone else. But the third I'm going for, and it was a kind of little bit of a toss-up, but I'm going to choose Andy Cole. Probably should call him Andrew Cole, as he prefers to be called.
I actually think he came out and said, I don't actually mind which one I'm called.
Yeah, look, he definitely had a period of about 10 years where he was a bit funny about it. I've seen him many times be talked to, and he'd be like, "No, my name is Andrew. Don't call me Andy." Now I think he maybe he's got a bit older and a little bit like, "Oh, I'm not as bothered." But 187 goals for Manchester United in the Premier League. Again, a player I remember when he came to the football club from Newcastle, a little bit older, that we gave away Keith Gillespie for him. And Keith Gillespie was in many ways at that point our Garnacho. He was that kind of player, young player that we wanted to develop. People thought was a little bit of wild and a little bit of a playboy, but had so much upside. We didn't want him to go. And when he was using that deal to get Andy Cole, a lot of people were like, well, look at this. Keegan's done one here. He's taken the better player, and we've got this tap-in merchant. Well, that tap-in merchant did pretty good, didn't he? Treble, X amount of titles, hundreds of goals, one of the greatest number 9s of all time. In the days when number 9s were number 9, Scott, when they put the ball in the net from 6 yards, 10 yards. Andy Cole had his faults in his game, but he certainly deserves to be in that Hall of Fame because he was such an integral part of that front line. Him and obviously Dwight York, incredible partnership. And he would thoroughly deserve to be there with those other 2 players. I think you also say that Carrick and Gary Neville were certainly Hall of Fame.
Big shout out Michael Carrick, by the way, for his managerial exploits with Middlesbrough.
Well, I think Middlesbrough we expect potentially to come up this year. Maybe they're not far away, are they? And I think if not, he could be the guy anyway that ends up in the Premier League next year as a manager. Like we're talking
West
a lot
Ham,
about.
I can see West Ham.
Well, manager roulette happening as we speak. I do think David Moyes will not be at West Ham much longer, from what we're hearing, and I do think someone like Michael Carrick could be the name. They're in that situation, aren't they? Former West Ham player. I think he'd quite like that job. It's a big job, isn't it? It's a big wage and a big opportunity. And I think, as a player, Michael Carrick, again, another player bought from Tottenham. And I remember United fans very low on it. Were like, he's not good enough for us. Well, he won plenty of titles, didn't he? And he proved that he was good enough for us. He became one of the best screening midfielders of all time. He was so good just sitting in front of the back 4 and sweeping up and getting the ball going towards Paul Scholes. So, they all deserve to be in there. Gary Neville, I think at his height, best right back in the world. When he at his very height, there was no one better than Gary in that period until he got that bad injury, and then it kind of knocked the end of his career. All deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Fans can vote at www.premierleague.com/Hall of Fame and via the official Premier League app. Voting is open until 6 p.m. Monday, 10th of April. That is BST UK time. So if you're listening from another country, just bear that in mind. But you have plenty of time still until next Monday to cast your vote. It is the 6th today as we record this. 3 inductees from this list of 15 to be announced on Wednesday, the 3rd of May. Rob, we'll end the show soon, but I just did want to get a late take on, you mentioned managerial merry-go-rounds. Frankie Lampard at Chelsea. Interesting.
Well, I was going to tweet about this, but let's do it here instead.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, I think like it's a complete basket case, isn't it? The whole thing is a basket case. Have Lampard at your club, sack Lampard, take Tuchel, win the Champions League the same year, sack Tuchel, get Potter, spend 650 million on a load of players who have done nothing, come 10th, hire Frank Lampard. So there is a logic to it, but the logic is rubbish. So Todd Bowley continues to play Football Manager on the worst version of his Commodore Amiga that he's ever had, and I have no idea why he thinks that this is a particularly good idea. What I think is really interesting is that Chelsea do see an upturn in form, and so they win these final, 8-10 games of the season. you might have to give Frank Lampard the job full time. You might have to. There might be a demand for it. So that's the risk here, isn't it? I said something about Frank Lampard there earlier about Everton, and it was deliberate. I think the thing is, at the end of the day, Frank Lampard is a decent coach. I don't really think he's a top 4 coach, and I think you still have to think about that for Chelsea. I know this is an interim period. Whether the players will respond to him, we'll wait and see. But Chelsea got to end up with one of the big names eventually, and I know this is the way they want to go. But going backwards, is that really the right way of doing this to rescue your campaign? Like, this is the guy you sacked. Todd Bowley might say, it wasn't us that sacked him. It wasn't really me. It was other people. But Lampard's a legend. He's a friend of the people on the board. And that's why he's been given this job, or is going to take this job, I think. And it's a bit of a strange one. Let's say that as a take.
As much as we talk about Man United and their issues, and as much as last season was an absolute awful account of Man United.
Yeah.
It's quite nice. I'll just say it's quite nice when we end the show. It's quite nice for Man United not to be the crisis club of the season.
And we are like for the season as a campaign as a whole, we are miles ahead of Chelsea and miles ahead of Liverpool. And we would have said at the start of the season, we wouldn't be. We'd all would have said, no, we're not going to finish above those two. I remember Chelsea at the start of the season, people were like, yeah, Chelsea are the danger team here. They're spending all this money. They've got this amazing coach who's now at Bayern Munich, and they look like the ones who had the opportunity. That's not the way it's worked out, is it? It's gone the other way. Football is like that. You can swing backwards and forwards violently, can't you? It's the way it goes. But I think with Frank Lampard, you have to ask this question. Is Frank Lampard a better manager, a better coach than Graham Potter? The answer to that is no. So why make that swap? Why go there? Why not maybe stick with Potter? I understand that clubs react, when you're playing badly. You're not in the relegation zone. Like Chelsea, there's no issue with Chelsea in terms of if you finish 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, it doesn't really matter. It's just £50 million difference per position or whatever it is. So there's money involved. But why would you get rid of the guy that you've really stuck by? And really, you cut his legs off, didn't you? You gave him a ton of players. You can't really use half of them at the moment. They're not usable. But you spent 650 million, and what? Now you're giving those players to Frank Lampard for 10 games. It's just it's mad, isn't it? So I think Frank Lampard sowed at Everton. Bigger jobs, maybe in the top division, are out of his reach. I could see him being a championship manager or one of the clubs up there, or just talked about Michael Carrick. Michael Carrick would have probably been a better choice. I think he's got more acumen as it stands. So, but he's a Chelsea legend, isn't it? He's one of our own, all that, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot to do with that. Appease the fans. It sounds all very much like Ed Woodward and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer when they made that choice. That it wasn't particularly done on technical grounds.
That's it for us today. Everton go to Old Trafford on Saturday lunchtime. Hopefully Man United can continue it's not a run of wins. They've won one, but maybe they can start turning that into a run of wins. And hopefully we can see the back of this difficult period soon. United will have some first choice players back in the fold. Just one more game, hopefully. Until they are welcomed back into the situation. Subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts, and watch us now on YouTube as well. Tuesdays and Fridays usually, Tuesdays and Thursdays this week, maybe next week as well. Rob, I haven't had a chat with you about that yet, but we'll talk at some other point. Head over to our channel, like, subscribe, and leave a comment for us as well. And follow us on Twitter @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B, and @Promise&MU for the show as well. Rob, any final thoughts from you today before we switch off?
Now, off the back of the plugs, I'm going to say this. Please, 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 please share the show. Please share it. So many of you that send us so many nice comments, and we're really grateful for that. We love all the support and, everyone that watches every week, twice a week. We know it's difficult, isn't it? We do 2 shows twice a week, kind of around an hour sometimes. That's 2 hours of your life. There's so many of you that tune in and say that you enjoy what we do. But please share it on your socials. Keep crowing about us, and we'll keep plugging out that content for you.
Yes, please do that. Thanks for listening, everyone, or thanks for watching if you're watching on YouTube. We'll see you next week with another Promised Land Manchester United podcast. Thank you.